All right, everybody. It's the Combatcast with the man they call Dave and Chevy. And today we're brought to you by our new sponsor,
Game Up. Yes, we would like to thank Game Up for sponsoring the podcast. They make a thirst-quenching adult beverage with a special blend of electrolytes, a hard hydration drink. Currently comes in a variety pack with 4 great flavors: fruit punch, orange, lemon, lime, and grape.
That's right. And it's just 110 calories, low carb. So get yourself some Game Up. And Chevy, tell people what we got coming up.
April 13th, UFC 300, Pereira versus Hill. Excellent fight card, top to bottom. There's something like 15 former champions or title contenders fighting on the card. It's a ridiculous card. Very excited for it. And then the UFC is taking a break. So we'll be talking about the PFL 2024 regular season on April 19th. Koreshkov versus Umalatov. Local fighter to us, Brennan Ward, fighting on the card for PFL. That's probably the fight I'm the most excited about. Him and my other favorite PFL fighter, Brennan Loughnane. And then moving on, the end of the month, April 27th, UFC's back with a fight night, Nick Lau versus Cop 2.
Okay. So, really excited for UFC 300. Definitely need some more exciting fight nights, I think, coming up.
It's been a struggle lately, for sure.
Yeah. This fight night that we just came back from, I did not watch the main event. You talked to me about it. You sounded brutal. But there was some interesting stuff on this card overall. Why don't we start off with any fights you want to shout out or anything?
Yeah. Last week I said keep an eye out on the prelims for Nate Landwehr versus Jamal Emmers. Nate Landwehr was an underdog, but Nate Landwehr, which means that he got his ass whooped really hard for a couple minutes and then came back and knocked his opponent out, which is what he does. His post-fight press or his after the fight interview with Bisping was amazing. He dropped a bunch of one-liners in there. My favorite one was come whoop my ass and see what happens, which is perfect for him. Yeah. He's hilarious. So shout out to Nate Landwehr. Looked great.
He's a guy that can be a star without having to win a championship.
Right. He was on the prelims, and there's a bunch of guys in the stands wearing his shirts and super hyped for him. So yeah. Let's move on. Another fight we talked a little bit about last week. Chris Weidman versus Bruno Silva. Did you see this one?
I did. Before we get into the controversy and some of the stuff with the eye pokes, Weidman looked good in this fight.
Very good.
Yeah, and I was really surprised at how good he looked. He took a couple shots. They did notice right in the very beginning, he was almost checking a leg kick that wasn't even there, I think. There was something that you could tell that, that's got to be in his head still. And hopefully, again, even though there's the controversy, maybe this will be a good thing for his mental game when he's in the fight game. Because I don't think he's retiring after we saw what he did. And he did look good but there is controversy. And I have a problem. I'll let you get into the fight a little bit if you want, but to me, here's a couple things I have an issue with. One, I'm a big believer that anytime we have eye pokes or low blows, I don't ever want it going to the scorecards, honestly. I don't think it's fair. I know that Weidman probably was winning the fight otherwise, but you should be in control of what you do, and there should be bigger penalties for that. Now, that's not a knock on Chris. That's just how I feel about the overall rule set. I think that should change. I didn't like Weidman's post response. I thought he could just don't say shit, man. Just say it's unfortunate.
It's part of the fight game.
Yeah. We can do it again. Right. Absolutely. But the other thing too, for the fans online coming after Weidman, if you're coming after him for that response, whatever, I get it. But at the same time, even though there was an eye poke, Chris is going for the finish, whether he saw it or whatever. It's the referee's job to make sure that stuff doesn't happen. He needed to be on there and recognize it was an eyeball. And obviously, split-second thing, stuff happens. But nonetheless, again, this is why I have a problem with the rules because if a foul happens, even if it's an accident, we've already changed the course of the fight, though. There is no getting around this now.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm with you 100%. Weidman was looking great. I did see some people online. I don't necessarily believe this, but they noticed that his chin, which was previously quote unquote cracked. USADA's gone now. They have a different anti-doping agency or whatever, and Weidman's hasn't looked this good in years, so people were making whatever assumptions about that. But as far as the actual fight, Weidman looked great. And he looked great on the feet, which, we know his wrestling is great. Silva was prepared for the wrestling, but he was not prepared for Chris's pressure. And he landed some powerful shots on him that really stunned Silva. But going to the eye poke, I'm with you. It can't be allowed at all. They're told in their locker rooms beforehand, these are the things that you're not allowed to do. That's your warning right there. It should, and I understand it's going to happen, but it happened like 4 times. Chris poked him like 3 times, and then Silva poked him once. Like, that's just too many times. He was looking like John Jones out there. He was reaching out with his fingers pointed towards his opponent, and I know he's like trying to touch that lead hand or whatever. But you can't reach out like that. That's the refs got to be warning him or stopping the fight and giving him strong warnings. Got to take a point after the second one for sure. I don't care if it's on accident. You can't swipe at your opponent's face. Close your fists. It's a fight. Also, could be mitigated by the UFC if they just fucking change the gloves to gloves that are proper. Go back. I understand they don't want to pay Trevor Whitman all the money that he wants for his glove design or whatever. Go back to the Pride gloves. There's this much, a quarter inch of the fingers showing. It curves your hand more to a fist instead of keeping your hand out like that. It's just so ridiculous that the UFC makes a business decision where it ends in all these fucking stupid eye pokes that it really diminishes your product. Like, I hate watching that. I hate listening to, I love Paul Felder and shit, but I hate, he brings up every low kick and every eye poke all the time. And like, that ends up being the whole fight card is what they're talking about. It's already a diminished product. I just want to see people fight. I don't want to see him get poked in the eye, and this guy's diminished now for 2.5 rounds. These are solvable problems. So fucking solve them.
So I want to say something that probably Chevy and I is going to be the only person who gets this, but we used to work for a store back in the day, and it had an owner that was, kind of mom and pop, but he had some money and everything like that. And I remember one of the guys we worked with, this was back in the late 90s, but you would know him, I'll tell you off air, but he made a comment. He said that it's very strange that sometimes this man would just give customers like free cigarettes or something if they complained or said something bad in money. But then if you, the employee who worked for him, was short like 5 cents, you'd have to write like this whole paragraph of what happened and what we're going to do. And there's just something to do this sometimes with these businesses and the money that they have. They get in these pissing matches. Like, they don't want to give all this money for a glove. And it's like, just fucking do it. Like, you have the money. It's not going to kill anybody. Like, who cares? Anyway, I want to say one other thing before we move off this. I was thinking about matchups this week, and since Chris Weidman is clearly sticking around, and I believe this guy has a fight coming up, but just a fight I think that would be interesting, Paul Craig. Because Paul Craig's fighting, at middleweight now, and I think Paul Craig is not going to have the kind of power that's necessarily going to knock out a Chris Weidman. But he could submit him, and it could be a huge win for Paul Craig. But it's also interesting, and if Weidman can get a win over it, it might give more of his confidence back, and you continue to build up Weidman. So I think that'd be a great crossroad fights for both those guys if they did that.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's a great matchup for sure.
All right. Let's move on here.
All right, let's move on to probably the most impressive fight on the card for me. Vicente Luque versus Joaquin Buckley.
Yeah, what Buckley did here, wild. I did not see this coming. I did not see this happen. Vicente Luque, ground and pound, TKO, round 2. Very interesting that Luque, I believe he pulled guard, if I remember correctly, too.
That was his mistake. He tried to pull guard.
Yeah, very uncharacteristic. Some people are talking about maybe, he had some swelling on the brain earlier, a couple fights back after Jeff Neal, I believe it was. He had a loss with, and maybe he's fighting a little more nervous now. And definitely didn't notice that in his last fight, but you never know. It's something to consider and think about. I don't want to take away from Buckley, but great win for Buckley. I'll let you say the rest, but I'll throw out another name here for a potential fight with him. Wonder Boy Thompson. I know Wonder Boy doesn't necessarily like to fight back, but boy, stylistically, sign me up.
Yeah, I think ranking wise, Wonder Boy would not be into that, but stylistically, Joaquin's going to come forward at him, which is great for Wonder Boy's counter striking, and Buckley's not going to do a whole lot of wrestling. And when he does do it, I mean, I think Wonder Boy's takedown defense is high enough level where you wouldn't be too worried about it. So yeah, if they can't find Wonder Boy another fight, and if Buckley, I'm sure Buckley would take it, but we'll see. But back to the Luque fight. Yeah, I was really impressed with Buckley's footwork and his angles. And I think that Vicente's guard pull had a lot to do with he just couldn't solve Buckley's movement. And then Buckley was, landing heavy shots on him. So he's like, okay, well, I don't want to get knocked out. So let's try to get him to the ground. I'm sure I'm better on the ground. Well, he gave up position, and then Buckley just immediately went full on ground and pound. So Luque didn't really have a chance to try to work anything on the ground to try to sweep him. He didn't even get him in his guard, really. He just started getting, knocked around. So ended up being a bad decision, but I can see where he was making that decision from. But good on Buckley. Buckley looks better at welterweight for sure than he did at middleweight, and he does still seem to be, his game seems to be progressing. So interested to see where he's going to be, the next year or two.
Yeah, he's one I try to take care of, and he will get a ranking out of this too. So, that's why I was thinking, like, man, if you could book him and Wonder Boy, actually that other fight I mentioned, Chris Weidman and Paul Craig, book those on the same card. Weidman and Wonder Boy are friends. I'd love to see that.
And Buckley is, entertaining off on mic too. So he's a character. Yeah. All right, let's talk about this main event: Aaron Blanchfield versus Manon Fiorot. You didn't get to see this one, right?
All dominant from like highlights and stuff I saw, but
right. You had picked Aaron. I talked about how high I am on Aaron for sure, but recently, especially after that Rose fight, Manon has earned my respect, and stylistically, I was saying I think she is a tough matchup for a lot of girls in the division. She's tall. She uses her range well. She has great takedown defense. She's very strong. She uses her kicks very well, and her counter punching is good. So basically what happened for 5 straight rounds was Aaron just tried to blitz in. She was, determined. She tried to blitz in and land shots or get Manon in a clinch. But she ate a bunch of shots every time she came in. And then when she did get in, Manon was just stronger, really, and stuffed all the takedowns. So back to the drawing board for Aaron. Well, she would have been better served a little bit more head movement going in. I don't know if that would have changed the fight a lot, but it would have saved her some brain damage. And Fiorot moves on to a title shot, I assume. And either her or Valentina.
And that fight, I think Rose Namajunas, honestly, after this fight, her stock goes up a little bit.
Absolutely.
How close she fought Manon, So,
and that was her first time in the weight class too. Right. So
and hurt her hand.
Yeah. So
Rose
is the real deal for sure.
Yeah. So very interesting. So interesting card. Wasn't no stat card, but it had some interesting stuff that happened. Maybe we'll get lucky this week. We'll have some more interesting moments. But here it is, folks. Brendan Allen, Chris Curtis 2. We're going to talk about the main event and the co-main event. Before we do, any fights you want to plug on this card?
Yeah, Court McGee and Alex Morono. Both guys are never in a boring fight. So worth watching for sure. That's on the prelims. I think it's the featured bout on the prelims. So check that one out. But we'll get into this main co-main event. This main card starts at 6 p.m. Eastern time, which is nice for us. Mm-hmm. We got punished last week with a 10 p.m. main card start time. That was rough, but 6 p.m. main card for this week. Co-main event, Alexander Hernandez versus Damon Jackson.
I consider this almost like a playoff must-win situation for both these guys. Damon Jackson is 22-6-1-1, 4 KOs, 15 subs, 3 decisions. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. Alex Hernandez is 14-7, 6 KOs, 2 subs, 6 decision wins. He's lost 3 out of his last 4. Interesting to note, though, when you look at this guy's career, he has wins over Jim Miller, Oliver Alban Mercier, and Beneil Dariush. So he's definitely shown he can beat top-notch talent, but it doesn't seem like he's always consistent, you know?
Yeah, he's 6-6 in the UFC, so his inconsistency is tough. It's a very much a mental game for him.
I agree. I think it's a pick 'em. I'm going to go with Hernandez. I just think that, I think he's due for a win. He lost his last one, so I just think he's going to be mentally on. And but I think they're 2 tough fighters, so I'd say decision.
Jackson definitely more of a submission guy, and I think that Hernandez is powerful enough to keep it standing. He has, good enough wrestling defense. I think he can keep it standing, and on the feet, he throws with a lot of power. And I think he probably gets a KO. I'll say round 1 KO. He kind of clips him in the first few exchanges, and gets the finish. I'm hoping. And then we'll move on to the main event, Brendan Allen versus Chris Curtis 2.
All right. Brendan Allen, 23 wins, 5 losses, 5 KOs, 14 subs, 4 decisions. He's won 6 in a row and gotten 5 out of those 6 are finishes. He's got the
5 rear naked chokes, I think.
Oh, I think you're right. And he's got the second most submissions in UFC middleweight division history. All right. Chris Curtis, he's 31-10-1, 17 KOs, 1 sub, 13 decisions. This guy's fought in the UFC. He's fought in the Contender Series, PFL. This guy's been around for a while. He's a training partner of Sean Strickland. And most importantly, out of all this, he holds the initial victory. He TKO'd Brendan Allen in their first fight. Sean Strickland had TKO. So
that was also Brendan Allen's last loss.
Yes. So the big thing is here when I'm reading over these accomplishments over Brendan Allen, what he's accomplished now with these 6 wins in a row and how impressive he's looked, this is going to be a real test. We talked earlier about Hernandez struggling with mental game. Not that Brendan Allen has had that struggle, but this is going to be a test for your mental game because you're improving so much. But now that one guy who gave you your last loss and stopped you. Oh, and by the way, one of the other guys who beat you is his training partner. Like now you got to really show, okay, how much have you improved? Can you beat this guy? And it's not like this guy has slowed down. Chris Curtis, if anything, is consistent. So it's a real interesting fight. Again, I'll call this one's a toss-up too. Man, I think it's partly you. I'm going to blame you. I'm kind of on the Brendan Allen hype train a little bit too, though.
I like him.
Yeah, and I like Chris Curtis too. But
same.
Yeah, I'm going to say Brendan Allen finds a way to get this done. I'm going to say he submits Curtis. Curtis might pass out, but I think there's going to be a submission victory one way or the other here. It's going to be a war. I'm going to say round 3. I think Curtis is going to possibly light him up with those hands too. Not that Brendan Allen's hands are bad, but it's going to be an interesting fight. I think Brendan Allen will take a 3rd round submission victory though.
Yeah, Brennan obviously at the top of his game right now, on a streak since Chris Curtis before. also, Allen was not happy with his performance in that fight. Immediately wanted the rematch and has been calling for the rematch. So I think he mentally is looking forward to this because this was I don't remember. I think it was Vettori that was actually supposed to fight Allen, and Chris Curtis is stepping in on somewhat late notice. So I bet this is a welcome change for Allen. I think he's looking forward to it. I don't think either guy has changed their styles too much in this. So obviously Chris Curtis, very capable of his boxing is top level, especially for the division. So very capable of knocking Allen out again. But I think just momentum wise, I'm going to go with Brendan Allen. I think he gets his 5th rear naked choke in a row. I'm going to go with, I think it goes a little bit later. I'm going to say around 4. Pretty close fight up until that point. He gets him down at some point and jumps on that neck when Chris is a little tired, a little sluggish to react to clinch game and keeping a strong base on the ground. So looking forward to this main fight.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens. I don't know if I'll get to see it this week because there's a little thing called WrestleMania on this weekend.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So I will be watching that, but otherwise which by the way could have something to do with the 6 o'clock card. Maybe you don't want to go completely head to head.
Yeah, it's real toss up what people are going to watch. 3 days of WrestleMania or Brendan Allen and Chris Curtis.
All right. Tell me what we got coming up one more time. So.
All right. That's the reason why. So that's interesting. Back-to-back weeks for TKO, WrestleMania, and then giant UFC card. So big couple of weeks for TKO. But April 13th, we'll be talking about the UFC side of this duo. UFC 300 Pereira versus Hill. And then April 19th, PFL 2024 regular season, Koreshkov versus Umalatov with our local fighter, Brennan Ward, on there. And then April 27th, UFC Fight Night, Nicolau versus Cop 2.
All right. Very good. All right, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy the fights this weekend and enjoy some Game Up.
If you haven't tried Game Up, then you are missing out. Imagine your favorite seltzer and your favorite sports drink had a baby, but it's way better than that. Each can is 110 calories, low carb, 4.9 ABV. It's a nice light drink that is not light on flavor. Game Up comes in fruit punch, orange, lemon, lime, and grape. Pick it up at drinkgameup.com.